Hello friends, today I'm going to do that fun activity of tuning up my table saw. I've got a rigid R4512, but I'm sure these steps can be applied for many other table saws. This is something I do every year and a half, probably year and a half, and I should probably do it more often than I do. Over that time it's acquired certain sticky spots from glue. I've got some odd marks from whatever finishes and things that I had sitting on the stainless steel top. I've got a clogged dust port underneath. I've got a wheel in the front that when I turn it to raise and lower my blade, there's a point where it's really hard to turn it. So I have a feeling I got to grease that up. And then I'm just going to check alignment with my fence and make sure that it's perfect. I think it is, maybe a little bit off. Either way, I'm going to check that. The next two videos after this, one I'll be building a vise attachment for this side, and the second one I'll be building a router table to sit in this wing. And before those new additions come, I thought this should be clean and primed and tuned and good as new. I wanted to get down in the front to show you a couple things. First off, before you start, disconnect it and then take out the little yellow key in here, just to make sure nothing can turn off and zap you. Here's what I'm talking about with my wheel. As I get started, it's good. When I get going, gosh darn it, is that tough. So I've either got something clogged up in there or it needs some grease. Either way, we got to fix that. You'll notice my table rocks just slightly. I've got a really uneven floor in here. Otherwise, I suppose if yours was rocking like that and you had a level floor, you'd want to probably fix the feet. Those little rubber feet on the bottom, make sure you got them, or make sure they need to be adjusted, or fix the wheels, something like that. So to get started, I'm going to take off the cover here, take out the blade, and then unclog the bottom of my dust collection port. Alright, I'm sure none of you actually need to watch how one takes apart and opens up their table saw blade, but I figured I would talk with you while I did. I'm not in my workshop every single day. You know, I'm not a professional, I'm not a contractor or anything. Just an avid hobbyist. So when I come down, you know, I'll do a couple hours on a project or whatever, and then I'll tidy up my shop. But yeah, it's not perfect every time. You know, I leave some tools out, and I certainly neglect the inside of my table saw because I figure, you know, it's huge. It can collect some dust. No big deal. Now let me readjust my little spotlight here and kind of give you a feel for what it's like on the inside. We'll move the camera over. Let's see. Bear with me here. Can you see all that glorious sawdust down there? And that's pretty high up to the top too. In fact, I've got, you know, pieces, vertical pieces that are sticking out. So it's time for me to unclog the bottom and get that all taken care of. Hello, this should be tons of fun. First I'll reach up in here. Oh yeah, that's great. Ow, 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 ow. I got some big pieces. That's essentially what it is. Like, I'll cut off the very end of a small board and it'll start to lay down flat on top of this, and it creates kind of like a spider web where all of the sawdust is just sitting on top of it. Once you get that out of the way, you can see it opens it up. But the sawdust is so heavy and thick that it's just sitting there, so you really got to move your hands around. So I'll go up top. Excuse me. Yeah, you can see I'll shine a little light there. Of course, we all know what sawdust looks like, but let's see how much we can get to come out. So as you can see, it's so much sawdust. Look at that it goes right up to the top. So I've got to sweep this away and keep going. So there's something. I've got enough sawdust in here to mulch a small raised bed in the garden. Obviously, you can burn this, you can throw it out if you want. I've got a great big compost pile, and I haven't done, I think, anything with plywood in this last batch. So I will probably compost all of this. I'm not worried about composting walnut in small amounts like this. I find it really doesn't affect my garden in a negative manner. Otherwise, just spread it out in your yard. It'll decompose. It's good stuff. I made the plywood comment because I don't add like the glue material into my compost. So this was most of the drum. You can kind of hear that it sounds more hollow now, which it should. And let's see, when you're looking at the saw on the left-hand side, there's a drum that kind of sticks out. It's got part of the motor in that, and I found that a lot of sawdust really went in there and it kind of impacted itself. So this wasn't just loosely fitting in there. This was like you're taking dough and you're baking with it and you're squeezing it really tight. That's how it was sitting in there. So this alone will make the machine run a little bit better. Next step for me is to put this back, and I'm going to see what I can do about those wheels turning so poorly. All right, a few things to note. First off, we had a blizzard today and I needed to take all that sawdust out to the compost. And as I was coming back in and looking at the footage, I realized underneath my hat that I've been wearing all day, my hair was a mess. Sorry about that, so I just went up and did it and fixed it for the rest of the video. You're welcome. Secondly, back to the table saw. I forgot to mention this earlier. Take off any rings you might be wearing, wedding band, class ring, that kind of stuff. They have a tendency, it's a pretty tight space when you're actually reaching in the top of your table saw. You'll want to remove anything that could get caught on a rod or a piece of metal. All right. Hopefully this stays in focus. The next thing to do here, now that we've got the sawdust out of everything, for me is going to be to lubricate the rods that turn both the angle on the blade and the raising and lowering of the blade. One you can't see so well, but I've got to focus on this one. So right now I'm changing the angle of the blade. Essentially over time, dust and other particulates will clog up in between the threads here, and it just becomes cumbersome. Metal on metal gets it harder to turn in time. So there's a lot of different schools of thought about what you should use to lubricate. Because I don't use my table saw every single day like a professional, I'm going to be using paste wax. Works just fine, and it does a good job relatively repelling dust. If you use yours all the time, I suppose you could use some sort of oil, not like a spray oil like WD-40, but some oil. Anyways, your user manual probably has a better suggestion. What I'm going to do, and there's no way I can get a good shot of this with my setup here, I'm going to take a nice coarse brush and I'm going to clean off all of these two rods here, clean off between the threads. And then I'm going to take my paste wax and probably some steel wool, and I'm just going to apply it and turn it back and forth. And as you can hear this, it should probably take care of a lot of that squeak too. I've gone ahead and reinserted the blade into my table saw here, and I just wanted to show you how easily it turns now. Isn't that nice? So much easier than it was before. And if I head on over to my angle knob on this side, you can listen with the lav mic. The squeak is significantly reduced from what it was before. Good stuff. All right, now before we go ahead and reinstall the plate over here, this is a good time to double check your leveling screws. I see I've got some compacted sand over here that I'm going to go ahead and brush to get rid of. Yours might be pretty badly compacted, who knows. You could take a vacuum to this, that would suck it up just as well. And then go ahead and put your plate back on, and then just double check with a square that you're not catching anywhere. This is a lot easier to do if you're standing, over there at the end of your saw blade, and you've got the blade lowered, and you're taking a look to see if at any time your square is rising up on either side. If there's some sort of rock, then maybe I need to lower it here, raise it here, etc. figure that out, turn the screws, and do it now while you're tuning everything else up. Now that your blade is back and installed and we've got the plate in and it's nice and level, the next thing is to check your fence to see if it is parallel with the blade. In this case, mine is, but how I used to always check that is I'd raise the blade a bit, I'd just take a square, bring the fence over to it on one end, and then I would check the measure markings over here, see what it lines up to, move it back, flip it over, bring it back, check those measurements again, and they should be the exact same thing. If they're not, all fences are a little bit different. This particular fence I have, whoa, camera. This particular fence, I've got a series of bolts that I can loosen up, and then I can retighten this once it has been re-leveled. Or if we go around to the back, so on the back of my particular table saw, this is where the locking mechanism is for the fence, and this bolt can be turned to either tighten or make this a looser fit so that it clamps down how you want it to do. And for anyone who has heard the sound of a baby or nursery songs in the background, this is my shop helper, my daughter Charlotte. She just woke up from a nap and she wanted to say hello. Tuning up my table saw is a great thing to do with her while she's taking a nap because I don't have to turn the table saw on, so there's no loud noises or anything bad for her. So our final step in the process of tuning up the table saw for me is going to be to use some 4/0 stain wool and paste wax. This is the same paste wax as we use to lubricate the inside here. And I'm just going to rub vigorously across the table saw and then wipe that off and then put on a couple finishing coats and we'll be golden. Everything will slide right over this as smooth as I want it to. The more coats you apply, the more smooth it gets. I have a certain level of friction that I prefer with my wood. That's up to you. And just like that, once your wax is dry and you have the finish on your surface that you like, you are done. As far as things go for my table saw tune-up, and it feels great. All in all, it takes under an hour, depending on if you're, watching a child or not. And when all is said and done, if you've got some sort of a key, remember to plug that back in, and you are set to go for another, let's say, no more than 6 months, right? Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Happy woodworking.